Hello, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful episode of The Cheeky Natives. Obviously, it's me, Letlhogonolo, and I'm always with my ride and die, Dr. Slay.
Hey, so exciting to be on this week's episode of The Cheeky Natives. I mean, I'm on every week's episode of The Cheeky Natives, but every week is exciting. And so we're really super excited for today's episode. Sure, where do I begin? We have the supreme pleasure of having Zibu Sithole, who lives in Joburg with her son. She's a journalist with more than 10 years of experience writing for television and radio, as well as print and digital media. She's a published ghostwriter of some of your favorite romance novels. The Thing with Zola is her first novel published under her own name. And welcome to the author of The Thing with Zola. Dun, 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 dun.
Hey, Zibu.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I suppose you may know, and you get this question a lot, but I suppose one of the first kind of questions we have is, the question to talk about genre and your choice particularly to write about Black romance. Tell us more about that.
I don't think it's a choice. I'm going to be very weird about this. I do it a lot. I am very weird. People say genres choose them, and I'm going to say it too. Because Black romance, it's a thing, right? And it shouldn't be. Romance should be romance. But because our lives in movies, TV, in books, romance has become such a white thing that has created a space for something called Black romance, which is actually just romance because Black people are just people. I fell into the genre of romance by following what makes me happy. So before COVID, I was a journalist. I was a health reporter, and it was heavy. It was terrible. I mean, constantly reporting on death and sickness and who's dying and what can we do? We should stay home, fear mongering. It was all so much for me. I felt under so much pressure. I felt like I was going crazy, actually. So when I was retrenched, I breathed a sigh of relief and looked to do something that would make me happy and not make me feel like maybe COVID should have gotten me, And for me, that was romance because I absolutely love love. Love does not love me back, but I love love. I will chase love. It is the hill I am going to die on. And so writing romance was a natural avenue for me to seek and chase my happiness.
I really love the fact that you're saying you love love, right? Because obviously I also love love. So the thing with Zola was like every bit of love and romance that I love.
Yeah. Don't we all? Don't we all? I think like even the people who claim to just be cynical about love and romance, even those people at their core, on some way or another, just like believers of love. And this is the hill. This is the hill that I'm willing to die on. So my question is, you've done a lot of ghostwriting. Of course, that is potentially different, but there's almost a mental barrier that I imagine you've had to overcome in writing your own novel, right? And if you could take us through what the differences have been, right, between writing for somebody else or ghostwriting and then writing your own novel, and what made you decide to have the shift. So how did The Thing with Zola come to you in the form that it did? And what made you just get over that mental barrier?
I think the biggest barrier for me was emotional investment. When you are ghostwriting, you write it, you send it, you don't care what happens to it afterwards. But when it's your own book, it's got your own name, you are going to be expected to speak about this. You should have some sort of emotional connection with it. And that was tough for me because I did do public speaking and all of that, but as an adult, having to sit and speak as a professional person, somebody who's expected to have, that has been so difficult for me. I didn't have to do any of that with ghostwriting. I had email conversations with clients and that was it. So now going into writing The Thing with Zola, I knew this was coming. I had to be prepared to answer even questions that you don't expect. Like people intellectualize the tiniest detail. Like, why is the car pink? Can you tell us about the, you know? So as I'm writing, I've got this in the back of my head, and it's terrifying. Why is the car pink? You know, is it a feminist statement? You know, and not everything is a feminist statement, but people expect it to be. You've written a book, you should know this, you should expect this. And that is what was at the back of my head when at first a friend said, Anne Macmillan is looking for romance writers, you write romance, send them something. And I was terrified. I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to answer these questions? How am I going to put myself and my work out there? Because I've never had to do that before. But I took the leap because of peer pressure, and it's working out.
Peer pressure.
Positive peer pressure.
Thank you, peer pressure.
More stories. This is not the peer pressure our parents warned us about, yes.
No, this is the good kind. This is the good kind.
Yeah, you know, because the peer pressure we were told about is like the peer pressure to start doing drugs.
Right? No,
because our parents also always chose the most extreme.
Zibu, you've spoken about a lot of writing and loving love, but also romance, and we obviously call it Black romance because we want to talk about the interior lives of Black people and how they love. Who are what are some of your literary influences, right? So in writing the thing about Zola, what are some of the things that like inspired you to bring forth this beautiful novel?
So the thing with Zola is a love story, right? And although it is romance, it encompasses so many different types of love, which I get inspiration from so many different types of writers. I look for toxicity. There are toxic elements in romance. And my toxic mentor that I've never met has to be Zibu. That man's writing is how he writes toxic characters. He makes you feel sorry for them. You kind of love them, but you know you shouldn't. And I love how he did that. I also, while I was writing, I read a lot of Sunyati. I read a lot of Fred Khumalo. I love Bitches Brew. It is on constant rotation. And I got into, just as I was finishing, I got into Busisegile Khumalo. She writes romance, she writes thriller romances, and she is all African. Like all of her writing is based in African, it's about Africans. And I loved how she didn't make it seem like looking at Africa through a foreign lens. And that is also what I aimed to do. I wrote a book about township people living in the township, as I am too living in the township now. So I wanted to make it seem natural, and I wanted to read people who see the world kind of the same way I do, even if it's not from the same place, but see it face to face and not like from space, you know, because some people see the world as if they're watching a movie. And the people who inspired me are mostly people who see the world, interact with the world on a one-on-one basis. So yeah, it's mostly women, but yes, we move.
Shout out to the literary fave.
So I'm curious, like just getting into the book, because wow, the Okuhle and I had lots of feelings. Zola as a character is very, very nuanced. Zola is not intrinsically likable. There's a lot of Zola that is just difficult to take in, right? And I'm curious about Zola as a protagonist for a few reasons. But the first question really is, Zola comes back to Johannesburg from Germany, right? And she's, you know, it's an interesting sort of landscape because you think about how many people had to move home after COVID, after the pandemic and losing their jobs, and how many people's lives sort of shifted in a very particular way. And Zola is the cousin who returns home, and people come home for different reasons. Marriages don't work out, they lose their jobs, etc. Zola comes home for a very particular reason, and that's because she's almost unable to realize the very particular dreams that she sets out for herself, right? So they of like dreams that are almost denied, maybe deferred, have to take a very different shape. And I want us to speak a little bit about that, why Zola is placed in the way that she is as the cousin who has to come home after not realizing a very particular and a long-standing dream that she's put so much work and energy into.
So you're right. Zola is not perfect. She's far from it, but she's real. Because in as much as we all try to be good people, you're always the villain in someone else's story. People see you in a certain way. The things you do, the dreams you have might put you in a bad place. It might position you to be the bad guy in a particular scenario. And that's Zola. Zola had to fail to come home because in as much as she had this big dream, like many of us, it's a dream she had when she was 18. The things you wanted when you're 18 are not necessarily the things your 30-year-old self needs or wants to have. I mean, imagine the guy you were dating at 18. You do not want to spend the rest of your life with that man. No, nobody wants that because we change. And Zola is in a tricky place that I and lots of other millennials find ourselves in, where we're having a quarter life crisis. It's a rebirth of sorts. And because I relate so much with Zola and what she's going through, I figure there are so many other people who are going through the same thing. And watching Zola overcome it is kind of a strange companionship because when we read, we enter into a world, we make friends with people who don't exist. We have crushes, we have mentors. And I found Zola was that for me. She was the friend I was going through it with because I also realized that the things I wanted and planned and took so much time to work towards from when I was 18 to now are not necessarily the things I want, not necessarily the things that are working out. And it's okay to change directions. And with Uzola, she realized it wasn't working. Well, actually, she didn't realize. She wanted it to work and she crash landed. It just, the dream did not want her as badly as she wanted it. And she had to change directions, which is what a lot of us are doing. We are changing directions, we're changing career paths, we are realizing things. And I don't think enough is said about that second adolescence, you know, because I do think there will be another one at like 45, but it comes as a shock when it gets to you. Like, is this me? Am I going crazy? But the more you speak to people, the more you realize it happens to just about everyone.
I love that you say second adolescent because it feels kind of shocking to Zola that this became her life, right? And we see Zola really saying, I really tried my best to stay in Germany, but just things didn't work out, right? This grief of dreams that you had for yourself that will not happen. Like in Zola's case, this dream of having this wonderful life in Germany is just not going to happen. And circumstances is kind of letting Zola change course, right? And we'll get back more into kind of where Zola finds herself in. One of the other things that I think was interesting was the relationship between Zola and her mom, right? I find that for a long time, I got frustrated with Nonsebenzi, right? Because I was like, babes, why are you coddling Zola, man? She's a grown lady. Like, Uta Germany, she knows her stuff, right? And then there is a moment where she's like, hey, am I darling? No. You know, you are not better than us. You know, just because you went to Germany, you can't be better than us. And I think that's quite a profound and powerful commentary on the ways in which former models see and educated Black people go and get and all of this, right? And then come back to your mom's house in the township and be like, hey, mama, right? To be like, I've earned the credence to not want to wash, take down curtains and all of that. And I feel that that was kind of a tension that you were trying to do in the relationship between the two of them, right? To be like, in as much as I've done everything, because I've sacrificed a lot for you to be where you are, Zola, but now you're back. And even when the world has reminded you of where you come for slow, you are still still thinking that I need to get out of here because I sin Namutoa. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, just kind of this thing, the relationship between her and her mom and the issues, but also the kind of relationships you were bringing to light. So they didn't necessarily have an acrimonious relationship, but it wasn't an easy relationship because they, one, come from different generations, but also Nonsebenzi seems to be more realistic about the situation than Zola.
Well, just an added layer before we go there, it was also, I think we have some contrast in that relationship. There's a very particular contrast between the relationship that Nomsebenzi has with Tobile and the relationship that she has with Zola, right? And often being the oldest child, but also being the oldest girl child in an African household, comes with its own sets of constraints and restrictions and particular traumas, right? So of course your mother has to in many ways be, or of course your mother is softer and maybe a little bit less strict with your siblings, and so the relationship itself is less strange, right? So yes, of course there is the coddling that, you know, Lutokonolo is speaking to, but there's almost the opposite of that on the spectrum where you're not coddled and there's like a hyper independence and you're almost treated as a peer, right? And I think that it's important to also contrast that, because I think in many ways, this is why they're unable to meet each other in many ways, right? They just seem to constantly throughout the book be missing each other. So Zola almost behaves as if her family home is beneath her, but Nomsebenzi is also very cold sometimes in the way that she relates to Zola. So there's this tension that I think it wouldn't be fair for us not to acknowledge in thinking about, can Zola be a spoiled brat 100%? But Nomsebenzi herself is very particular in the ways that she treats Zola that I don't think Tobile would necessarily experience from her mother.
You're right. There is a difference in how Nomsebenzi treats her children. And it's not necessarily favoritism. It's an expectation she has on Zola. Zola should be able to do this and this. Zola should not need her. And because she doesn't expect Zola to need her, she's distanced herself and she's not playing into the mother role necessarily the way Zola needs her to, you know, because in as much as Zola does need to be snapped back to reality, she missed her mother's warmth when she came back. When she first came home and she was mourning the lost dream, the lost love, the entire life she had planned out for herself in Germany, she was mourning it alone. She didn't receive the sympathy she expected from her parents or her family, her mother, her sister. Everybody seemed to just be rolling with the punches, and she played catch up for the first part of the book. She was playing catch up. She needed to get a job. She needed to get her life going again. And it was without sympathy. That is where I found Nomsebenzi to be very cold towards Zola. But at the same time, it is the reality. When your dreams fall apart, your dreams fall apart. It doesn't stop the world from spinning. It doesn't stop people expecting you to show up for them in a certain way. People still need you to be Alma. People need you to be mom. You need to be wife. You need to be sister. You need to do your part. Like, never mind that your dreams are falling apart. And that's where Nomsebenzi and Zola were in the beginning, which people could call it toxic. I feel it is toxic because I myself, I am a gentle parent. I'm all about the hugging, the kissing it better, the cuddling and everything. But the reality is people of our parents' generation are mostly not into gentle parenting at all. You need to meet expectations, whether you're happy or sad. Your emotional well-being does not play into the duties you need to perform at all. And that's where Zola and Nomsebenzi clash a lot. Tobile, on the other hand, she is younger, she is cuddled a bit more, but she also meets expectations. She flies under the radar because Zola is the shining star. So as long as I'm doing my schoolwork, I am expected grades, I don't need to become an overachiever or do anything terrible or great because Zola has already done all that. All the attention is constantly on Zola. So in as much as Tobile is treated less harshly by Nomsebenzi, she also isn't seen as much as Zola is by not only I'm expanding it to the community, while we're talking about mother-child relationships, one that I was hoping you'd catch is the contrast between the parental relationship between Zola and Nomsebenzi and Mbali, our love interest, and his mom.
My darling,
we're getting there.
We are
We're getting there,
there.
Zibu.
We're getting there.
Because
yes.
because
Let's go.
don't worry, don't worry. We
Don't
got
go
you.
deeper.
We got you.
Don't go
Hold it
deeper.
up a bit. Here, hold it up. I wanted to say one of the things that I found quite it was a really light moment in the book, right? Because it really reminded me of Black moms, right? So Nomsebenzi comes out of the yard and starts screaming because, you know, Zola is this 18-year-old. She's a perpetual 18-year-old in Nomsebenzi's eyes, right? And she says, hey, I don't care how old you are, in my house, we close the gate at 7, you know? And I was like, damn, man, you know, like, no matter how old you may be, right? If you live in your mom's house, she's going to be like, those are my rules. You can do whatever you want to do, but those are my rules, right? No, what was also fascinating for me was kind of this contrast that you played, right? Geographically, but beautifully also to think about race relations, right? So the geographic kind of distinction is Germany versus Sithole, right? But also the tension between Gunther and Zola, right? And you did it so beautifully because for me, it felt like in many ways, Gunther was the Aryan race, right? So that is the epitome of wealth and whiteness. And Zola must always assimilate, but also like aspire to enter there, right? So the question about we are all working for you to come back to this first world, to come back to this white, is also interesting because it's thinking about like whiteness being good, Germany being better than South Africa. And Gunther's interaction is also in a sense of saying, no, but my mom says I can't go to Africa, right? So even when you think about the kind of distinction between what class and race does, right? So Nomsebenzi is like, girl, you gotta pull your bootstraps up, right? Gunther's mom, on the other hand, is like, you ain't going to Africa. They're gonna kill you. You're gonna die. That's what's gonna happen. And for me, it was interesting to think about like how even it seems like a switch, in Zola's mind is like, oh shit. So Germany will forever be this thing that I must aspire to be, right? So I will not be able to create home for myself here in Sithole with this person that I love, right? Because this person that I love has believed Africa to be like this outside thing. And I was interested in that, right? Kind of this idea of whiteness as assimilation, but also the protections of class, right? Because we think about the relationship between Mbali and his mom, and the way in which that coddling and that kind of protectiveness and that gentle parenting, if you are to call it that, happens. And it feels like, even though the mom may have had some hardships, because we don't know, Black parents got some hardships, but she's made now, she's like living her life. She's like, yeah, whatever. But for Nomsebenzi, for me, it's like, girl, there's no luxury for us to be in bed and cry. We gotta get a job. Bills gotta be paid, So I wanted to speak a bit about the whiteness, right? And in the geographic location, but also in the tension in the way Gunther's mom reacts to him coming to South Africa, for instance, and how in many ways, even as a young adult, his mom is still making decisions for him in that way.
But also decisions in a very, like a very coded, microaggressive way, almost like I have to protect you from these people and this place, right? Because intrinsically, Zola is going to be using you for citizenship, for your money, for your access. And so there's like a microaggression, even in how Gunther's family interacts with Zola, right? That I don't even know if it's a microaggression as opposed to just being a very particular kind of racism that Zola is exposed to, or Zola has to deal with, right? And I guess I think the Tlokonolo's question is really important around assimilation, but also what we have to do and what parts we have to give up of ourselves in order to meet the requirements of white supremacy, right? So what do we have to give of ourselves in order to assimilate into particular spaces? Is Zola going to start changing her name? Is she going to have to accept that people will ask her strange questions about her hair, about her skin, etc., in order to assimilate into this space? And can somebody who loves you demand that of you in the way that Gunta has?
I like that because Gunta doesn't love Zola. He really does not love her. He sees her as, I don't know, some sort of exotic pet. Because he plays very much into the white savior role, where he's pulling her out of the poverty and the suffering of Africa and taking her into civilization. It's very John Smith in Pocahontas. That is who he sees himself as, and it's who his parents see him as. Whereas when in the description of their relationship, Zola has a plan. She knows what she wants. She's got things together, but she meets Gunta where he doesn't have things together. But because he comes from an affluent European family, he is kind of protected from that. He's insulated from the realities of being a 20-something-year-old who doesn't know what they want to do with their lives. Whereas Zola knows she can't just go home and study indefinitely, pick up philosophy, then sociology, drop this, pick up law. She doesn't have that luxury. And Gunta is very much aware of the differences in their economic and social circumstances. And I feel rereading it now. When I wrote it, I didn't feel this way, but now rereading it, there's a predatory something about him. The way he preys on what he sees as her desperation to be in Germany and live this life that he has without having to ever work for, which is what he uses to kind of lure her over. The failed engagement, all of that is Gunta seeing Zola in a certain way that is not as an equal or as someone who is deserving of love. He gives her love as kind of pity. It's a pitying love. It's not a love between equals, which is why when Zola comes back to South Africa and she meets different people and she falls in love in a different way, she can see the difference between someone who loves me and wants to live this life thing with me versus someone who says they love me and wants to save me from what is and has always been my life.
He wants us to just go back to some of the relationships in the book before we move on to the love, because the lovers are messy. They are messy, all of them in like different iterations. But some of the relationships in the book that I'm particularly struck by is the relationship between Zola and Zozo, right? So I think with this, the Black middle class obsession with being upwardly mobile and navigating the world in a particular way, there is almost this sense of looking down on people who may not have the same experiences as you, and almost feel as though their life experiences are kind of like to be disregarded, right? So have no value in yours. So I think of Zola and Zozo because Zozo is the cousin who is so completely different to Zola, right? She doesn't sound a particular way. She's almost like a caricature of like what you think like a typical girl, you know, would be like if you were thinking of being problematic and thinking of girls from certain spaces. And Zozo is like that, right? But Zozo turns out to be a great ally for Zola. She is incredibly street smart. She knows how to be practical. She gives Zola advice that makes sense. But Zozo is also unashamedly herself in a way that Zola cannot, because Zola is constantly cowering to something. If it's not like whiteness and assimilation to like being Gunta's project, then it's carrying to like the idea of what your life should be, and almost like if it's not this thing, then your life is just over and it needs to end, you need to lie in bed. And Zozo is the complete opposite of that. And there's just a thing about that relationship which is particularly striking, because Zola is in many ways in a very privileged position, right? She's gone to school in this place, she's gone overseas, she has lots of experience in ways that are outside of Zozo's sort of ambit, right? But Zozo is the cousin who has it together in ways that Zola does not. And I'm curious about that relationship because there's just a very particular commentary that I think you make in writing almost what shouldn't be but is an unlikely friendship.
So everybody who either is or has an English speaking cousin knows that weird relationship where you grow up together, and then at some point, I'm not sure who decides it, but someone decides that one is better than the other. And then it goes forth in those exactly in that way where one behaves as if they are better than the other and the other knows their place. With Zola and Zozo, it went that way until Zola's reality check. And even though when she came back, she still looked down on Zozo, it was only when she realized that Zozo has something to offer her when she has nothing to offer in return, that she saw the change in the dynamics of their relationship, where now that she's back in the township, she might be working a job that she thinks is better than Zozo's job, but Zozo has access to a wealth of wisdom that she does not have because she does not have those life experiences. She has been so hyper-focused on an academic career, on building a specific type of dream, where Zozo has experience in being disappointed, for one. She's had a whole life that Zola has not had. So she needs to tap into Zozo's intellectual resources and as well as physical resources. She doesn't know how to get places. She doesn't know what to do in certain situations. And for her, Zozo was kind of a warm hug from the township, you know, because it's tough coming back, but coming back, you also find comfort in places that you had not looked for comfort in before. And that's what Uzozo is. She is that you're back, it's okay, you still belong, because she also brings up their childhood, something that Zola had not considered before. And yeah, I love Zozo for one. I think Zozo is much better than Zola. I love Zozo.
I love Zozo. And I think Zozo is just like, it's this idea that like, even with all the things that you do to enter the orbit of whiteness and to become approved by it, right? There is like a kinship among people who look like you, who've had the life experiences that you do, that whiteness and white supremacy will never offer you. So you're constantly always going to be reaching, trying to get into that inner circle, but you just will never do it, right? And there's like a thing about the familiarity and the love and the calling in that Zozo is able to do, despite the fact that Zola has really just been really crappy towards Zozo in a lot of ways. Like she's been very crappy, she's been very judgmental, very nose in the air. And despite all of that, Zozo is like, you know what, we're still kin, and I call you back. And I think that's such a it's beautiful, because I think you don't often see what grace looks like in situations like that we can find our way back to each other, even when one has been super crappy to the other, right?
And I think also what I really like about Zozo is content with where she is. So she's not like having this need to escape her life in the way that Zola is. And I think that kind of settledness allows Zozo to be level-headed, right? I mean, Zozo's not without her faults, right? She's busy thinking that Thabo is cheating, kanti Thabo bought a car, but but it's just, I think she's a little bit more content with her life in a way that Zola isn't, right? And so at the end, eventually, this friendship kind of blossoms, right? Because, even the English doesn't work in Vosloo, So I thought it was a really wonderful way to think about it. But even when you think about the kind of relationship between Zola and Tobile, right? In the beginning, it felt like they were just roommates, right? Just people who were sharing a room, Zola was obviously, as you said, dealing with the grief by herself, right? And Tobile was also trying to be like, oh, now this girl is back, like, oh, what do we do? What's up? But I feel like throughout the course of the book, their relationship got better, right? And Tobile kind of was like, oh, Gele, how is it Mbali? Like, let me show you, And also like Zola picking up like little details about the type of car, because she knew that Tobile would want to know all the salacious details and all of that, right? And so for me, I thought that relationship also blossomed. There was a lot of mending that kind of happens and healing throughout the book. Whereas in the beginning, it was a little bit shaky, but as we see, it gets a little bit better. Now, guys, I want to be honest. Mbali is hard. Mbali is hard for me. Because now I think Mbali
Go deeper,
now I
babe.
think
Go
Mbali
deeper.
toxic, I think Mbali took it personally. I just want to put it out there. I'm like, yes, it's a love story. Yes, we love it. But Mbali toxic, guys. And I want us to start there. To be like Mbali.
No, but you can't just say Mbali is toxic. Go deeper. Tell us why you're saying Mbali is toxic.
Look, I let's first start with the family situation, right? Mbali's family situation, for us people who envy two parents, supportive parents, whole parents, they've raised their children, seems good, amazing. Mbali grew up with his mom and dad, but when we go underneath, under the surface, we realize that Mbali's family is actually very dysfunctional. I mean, Mel would every nang ning. She's seen all 7 continents in the world because her husband be cheating with younger people, right? And for me, it feels like even the contrast between Zola's family and Mbali's family is that we may think that Mbali comes from a good family, right? Because of what the world and materiality says. But actually, Mbali comes from a dysfunctional family, whereas the society may say that Zola comes from a dysfunctional family, Udlako force law, 1-parent household, single parent, and all of that. But we realize that in truth, Zola's family is more supportive and functional in the way that Mbali's parents isn't. And we see the relationship between even Mbali towards his parents. Him and his dad, nah, they don't have a good relationship at all. And one of it is that Mbali will never be good enough in the eyes of his dad. His dad is the type of person who believed he's built everything that he's gotten from himself and Mbali's just smooching, right? But we know that also Mbali has resentment towards his dad because his dad is just like, so like callous in his cheating. He's very just like, whatever, I don't care. And his mom, even with her own difficulties, is trying to keep it gay. She's like the epitome of the kind of, we always have to present a good picture to the world, right? And so for me, I'm like, I don't like Mbali. I mean, one, because on the surface, he looks great, but it is functional. I mean, a drunkard.
Tough crowd, yes, tough crowd. I want to challenge you a little bit, both of you. So Zola is incredibly layered, right? And it's difficult to understand that so much of Zola's background has resulted in her being the way that she is. So this desire to escape where she comes from, this cold relationship she has with her mother, etc., etc. And there's room and space for that. But Mbali, of course, is privileged, like you're saying, but in many ways, Mbali is also missing the parental love, the parental attention. Mbali gets raised by his grandmother, right? So there's already a thing about being raised by proxy. So his parents don't actually actively raise him. But also, Mbali's father really behaves in very embarrassing and callous ways. So there's a thing about Mbali having to be a protector of his mother, right? And there's like a parentification because Mbali has to step in and almost preserve his mother's dignity. And so, yes, you know, there's room for understanding that Zola is nursing a broken dream, and that's why Zola can be so terrible, but not necessarily understanding Mbali because Mbali grew up in a home with a Porsche. And I feel like making those kind of black and white distinctions doesn't do justice to the ways in which the characters themselves are very layered, right? So if the roles were reversed, would we still be feeling the same about Mbali and Zola?
Hater, please tell us.
Well, Mbali and Zola are both imperfect. They're both toxic in their own way, in the same way that we are all a little bit toxic. I've had to own a lot of my own toxicity over the years, and Mbali and Zola are facing the music in their own corners in ways that they did not expect. Mbali is obviously toxic because he does so many things to try and be enough for his dad, which he never will be. At the same time, he is a grown man being a baby for his mom. He's trying to fill needs he should not be filling. So in so doing, he ends up doing all kinds of terrible things that affect his own life and how he is seen in his relationships. Because he's a baby man, basically. He's a man for his dad and a baby for his mom. And then he needs to be a lover for Zola. It's it's never gonna work. It's never gonna work. Something has to give. So Mbali is definitely as toxic as you think he is. He definitely needs to see someone about the issues that he is not working through. But he is what a lot of us deal with when we walk around in the malls. That is the man hitting on you. He's got a lot of secrets, a lot of weird things are happening in his life, but at the same time, he's trying to fall in love. He wants that soft, warm, squishy fantasy kind of love, even though his life is falling apart. The same way you do, because that it is what's happening with all of us, right? Your life could be falling apart, but you will not pass up a chance at romance, even in the midst of all of that.
I want to speak a little bit more about Mbali, because I'm just intrigued, right? So Mbali and Zola meet, and Mbali in true toxic form, right? Because Mbali has grown up with relationships seeming to follow very transactional pattern, right? So you throw money at people, you throw money at things, and this is why people like you, this is why women are interested in you. So Mbali throws money at Zola and does all these extravagant things, but seems to not know what to do with somebody who's just not impressed by like class and privilege and the proximity to those kind of things, right? And it's very interesting to watch him almost navigate this relationship and just look floundered, right? And seems to be floundering at the idea that you're not going to buy a girl flowers and she's going to be melting, you know? But there's also a very calculated cowardice in the way that Zola goes about his pursuit of that Mbali goes about his pursuit of Zola. So he knows that we have Okuhle in the mix, and we'll speak about Okuhle a little bit later. But he then sends flowers. I mean, after he discovers that Zola works with Okuhle and there's this thing, he then sends flowers and he does things that complicate her working relationship with her boss, right? And instead of just breaking up with Okuhle and saying, Okuhle, it was good, or maybe it wasn't good, but thanks. He does this cowardly thing that men do where they just want to mistreat you so badly until you decide to end things, right? Because then I didn't break up with you, you broke up with me, and that leaves the door open. And I just struggle to reconcile these two sides of I guess it's two toxic sides of one coin. But the pursuit of Zola and his approach to his relationship with Okuhle is interesting.
And I think particularly interesting, it's typified by the fact that, you know, when he left Okuhle, he said, we'll find our way back to each other, right? And so he literally gave her something to hang on to. And now at least long, because he's a coward, he couldn't just say like, babes, I'm done.
Yeah, he's not finding anything, like not even the balls to end the relationship. Like,
and the way in which he does it, for me, it's like very insidious. I mean, on both Zola's part as well as Okuhle's part, right? So on the one hand, he's buying at the office that Okuhle works in for Okuhle to see. He comes, drops off flowers, wants to have lunch, like just, it's like rubbing it in her face, right?
Yes.
And then on the other hand, he takes Okuhle to the hospital, he takes Okuhle to the wellness retreat recovery center, and Zola is there, right? So it just feels like he doesn't know how to show up, right? He's not emotionally mature.
Yes, so he's messy.
He's like really messy things, right? And I was interested in that because I feel like, babes, we know these messy men.
We know them, and it goes back to Mbali being his mother and his father's son. Because his mother loves Okuhle. His mother wants him to take care of Okuhle and be this man that Okuhle wants. But at the same time, he wants to man up, make his own choices, and then he'll show his dad. His dad will see, you know, that his life is not run by his mom. And that is why, because he's trying to play both roles, that is why he's so messy. That's why he ends up making a complete horror movie of his love life. Because he wants Zola, he wants to pursue Zola. His dad would be so proud of him for going after what he wants. But Okuhle is the makoti his mother has always imagined, you know, and breaking up with her after having grown up together, you know, the foundation was there from their baptism. They share a baptism picture. So the parents were so involved with what the parents really wanted. they raise them in such a way where it only naturally it ends up that way. But he doesn't want that. He wants something else. And that happens to be Zola, who then also happens to work with Okuhle, which also makes it easier for him. And he is known for looking for the easiest way out. So it just goes with his MO for him to pursue Zola while she's there with Okuhle. He's toxic, he's messy, but messy men fall in love too, and they are also somebody's dream man. Somebody's dream husband is that messy man you want nothing to do with.
I'm sorry, the
So
way
I
you
think
said
that
that was poetry, right? Messy men fall in love too. Messy men also want love. I'm like, okay, all right.
messy people fall in love, right? And maybe this is also the antithesis to the idea that like you need to almost be perfect and done in your healing journey in order to be deserving of like a particular kind of love, right? But what I find interesting, I thought their relationship was quite sweet, you know, save for things started in an interesting way. Mbali initially did not have a lot of redeeming features because the whole time I was reading those interactions with Okuhle, I'm like, what in the mess? What in the mess is this? But I think he really allows Zola the space to come into her own.
It's undini.
Yazin, what is this pet name thing with your ex? Like, you know what? Zola is a better person than me. That's what I'm gonna say. She is a better person than me. So there's a way in which she allows Zola to come into her own, right? Like we see her relationship with Gunta is in many ways, it feels almost like an unequal power pairing, right? Gunta holds the strong passport, the citizenship, this place where she's always aspiring to be. And I guess that's almost a proxy for white people. But Mbali, you see Zola push back a lot with Mbali, right? So when she doesn't like the way that she does particular things, when she's uncomfortable, when there are things that happen that she's not happy with, Zola pushes back. And it's almost like we are watching Zola learn how to attach in a non-anxious way, right? So we see her attached to this person, but also see her come into her own, right? So come into her own in terms of what she believes, but also in terms of the comfort of saying, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And if you're not willing to meet me where I need you to meet me, it's also okay. And that I found beautiful. So if we can talk a little bit about the relationship between Zola and Mbali and why you allow it to sort of take the journey that it takes, but also why there's that big thing at the end where, you know, now they're like lovebirds and we're all like, oh my God, you know, she spent the night, she texted her mom, like, girl, see you when I see you. And then it's like, okay, we are humble, you know, so she leaves and then it's like almost like this place where we're just like, what's going on? So I'm really curious about the ways in which you allow these two lovebirds to come into themselves in very different and particular ways.
So for Zola to leave, firstly, it was for her to come full circle with the whole relationship thing, right? Because her and Gunta couldn't make it work apart because Gunta only wanted Zola under certain terms and conditions. So it's important in Zola's growth for her to have or take a love interest lover that doesn't set the terms and conditions. Although Mbali wants to do that at first, Zola rejects that. And Mbali must make his peace with it. So they're both growing. Watching them fall in love is watching them heal and grow and form this healthy relationship together. Because in being rejected, learning that the little things don't really impress women. They could impress the little girls you and your dad are used to playing with, but they don't impress the type of woman you want. That is Mbali growing. He learns that buying the flowers isn't going to make a big impact, but sitting down with a girl's mother and stating your intentions, that is a big deal. You know, you can take her on all the vacations you want, but once you've spoken to her mother and, you know, swallowed your own fears, that's a big deal. So Mbali grows up in doing that. He backslides by wanting to keep Zola, trying to use Okuhle, like, no, Okuhle is trying to break us apart. And because Zola has grown past that, and she's choosing herself, she's like, nah, I am growing. Either you grow with me or you get left behind. So he chooses to grow. And him going to the airport and physically watching her leave and being okay with that, being secure in she's going, but I love her, she loves me, and it's okay. It's a growth point. It's not a sad goodbye, will they, won't they? It's we are secure enough in our connection and in our relationship to be apart and not constantly worry and nag and think about, is Okuhle trying to steal Mbali back? Has Zola found a new man because she went to Germany and she found one? She came to South Africa and she found one. You know, now she's going to Rwanda.
Girl.
Is she going to find another man there? You see? She could. Now, Mbali has grown up and so has she. And they're both secure in knowing that we can have a relationship and be apart. If it falls apart, it's not the end of the world, but we are willing to make it work. It's a growing up thing. Yeah, that was very for me.
So I mean, just to echo that, because I know Letlhogonolo feels completely different, but also just, you know, for two points. One being that you see Mbali outgrow this thing where his mother almost, in her bid, I guess, to escape the father, fixates on him a lot and babies him, like you're saying, and he's almost centered a lot, right? So he expects that the woman in his life will make decisions around his comfort, right? And you see him heal and shake that, right? He has to let Zola go because Zola is going whether he wants her to go or not. But also, he has to let her go because this is her dream. And in loving her, part of that is also the ability to let the people in our lives pursue the things that are important to them. But also to see Zola make a decision to not center a man and not to center romantic love in the way that I think, you know, so many women do, and I guess that's part of the work of patriarchy, is an empowering one, right? To say, I'm leaving, I've got this thing, it's choosing to pursue my dream may just turn out to be even more important, right? And that for me is an important, it feels like a feminist statement. It feels like at the end of that, there is a feminist statement to say, like, there is the act of writing against the patriarchy, to say, I love you, it's great, and it will be great, but I'm going to Rwanda. Because if the roles were reversed and Mbali had the opportunity to pursue a business deal in Rwanda or anywhere else, it would almost not even be something for him to think about. The assumption would be that the women in his life would alter their lives to fit into whatever his schedule may look like. But Letlhogonolo, I know you feel differently. I know you have very strong feelings about the
ending. For me, I wanted to fight you, Zibu. I won't lie. I wanted to like climb into that book and fight you, because I'm like, yes, it's fine, I'll call you every day, but now, girl, like, we need more. Like, what I wanted to happen is that he needed to be like, I will be on a flight tomorrow, and the 6 months that you're there, I'm going to be there with you. But because for me, I kind of feel like, I was saying to Alma, for me, you know, we often talk about happy ever afters, but for me, this felt like a happy ever beginning, right? And for me, I wanted more of the beginning. And I suppose for me, the truth is it's testament to the good, how good a book is, right? Is that when it comes to an end, you're like, hold up, give me a different ending, an ending that I'm happy with. But it's like a continuation. Even if you ended with him getting onto the flight, I probably wanted to know, are they going to get married? Are they going to have children? You know, those type of things.
No, uyaphi Mbali? Uyaphi Mbali? Uyaphi? He must stay home akadindlu. Like, he must stay home akadindlu. Uyaphi?
Say it's a happy beginning, and I'm okay with it, but I wanted to fight you. That's what I'm saying.
Wow. I think it would be remiss if we didn't speak about the relationship with Okuhle, because Okuhle is just, this book is full of unlikable people. Okuhle is not likable, you know?
People personally, do you like Okuhle? Personally, do you like her?
I love Okuhle, guys. What?
No.
Okuhle is not likable. Okuhle is... No. Okuhle is entitled. Okuhle navigates the world in a very particular way that only privilege and class and I guess even adjacency to certain things allows you, right? So Okuhle believes that just by virtue of being herself, she's entitled to certain things. And some of those things include romantic interests, romantic relationships, right? And it almost feels like she feels like, how dare Mbali be interested in a woman who looks like Zola as opposed to a girl like her who comes from the place that she comes from, who has the parents that she has, right? And there's like a way in which privilege allows you to almost become delulu, right? So you feel like because you
it's the
grow up in a particular place,
Salulu.
and it's not the Salulu, it is the Salulu to heartbreak. That's what it is. It is the Salulu to you getting heartbroken. And so Okuhle is unlikable because part of her almost indignation at the fact that Mbali likes Zola is that she just almost believes that Zola is beneath her, and that her and Mbali are just like this perfect parent because they evenly matched in terms of where they come from, in terms of who they are. And that is difficult to stomach in a person, because it also means that you believe that you deserve things over other people, and you'll do whatever it takes to get those things over them. So you'll send emails from their phone. You'll just navigate in a very particular way.
That's right.
I can't disagree. I will not, even though I do have a soft spot for Okuhle. I feel like everyone else, she is a product of her circumstance, right? How you choose to move from that is up to you. But we meet Okuhle's mother, and she's a piece of work. For Okuhle to have turned out, yes, she's a mad woman. She's a mad woman. And she comes from the political elite. So she's mad and she's got power. She's a force of chaos. She's an agent of chaos because she comes in, she intimidates Uzola, and she steps in for her daughter where it's not necessary. So when you see things like that, it does make me wonder if Okuhle was even given the opportunity to grow up and be something different, have a personality of her own, because her mother is very overbearing, her mother is very demanding, and her mother is very involved. There's a conversation where Mbali is defending Okuhle to Uzola, and she says, look, this girl couldn't even ride the bus with us on field trips. And that speaks to the type of upbringing that Okuhle has, the types of opportunities she had to form her own personality outside of what she and her mother have dreamt up as the life she should live. So in that way, I can sort of sympathize with Okuhle, although her treatment of Zola is in many cases inexcusable. I mean, she summoned Zola to the care facility she was in so Zola could witness her and Mbali taking care of each other. It was, it's an ugly thing. It's ugly. And at the same time, she wants to play big sister. So she is scheming, she is vindictive, she is the bad guy, but at the same time, every character in the book, maybe I've spent more time with them, but I do have sympathy for every single one of them. So Okuhle, she gets a hug.
She does have some redeeming qualities, right? I mean, they were difficult to find, but she does have some redeeming qualities.
But also, to be fair to Okuhle, she's also a product of socialization, right? And a product of like kind of a patriarchal institution, right? So we find that how we can have soft spots for her is she's also growing up in a society that says no matter how successful you are as a Black woman, if you do not have a man next to you and children, your success doesn't mean anything. So she's also a product of contending with that, right? That like she's a successful woman and how dare she not find love, right? And how dare she not find a power couple? And Mbali said she must wait. And she's waiting. And why is he not coming? So yes, we give her some leeway to say, we understand that the society that you grew in, a Black woman, a successful Black woman who is a force of themselves, you are not recognized as that Black woman because you don't have a man or you don't have a child. And she's internalized a lot of that, right? And a lot of that is like, has become her personality. So the Delulu is like literally, she's having a relationship with someone who's not in a relationship with her and doing everything she can in her power to show Zola that she's in this relationship that she isn't, right?
But how she interacts with Zola is redeeming in some ways, right? So how she recognizes that Zola is talented. Yeah, give or take. But even Priscilla recognizes Zola for the force that she is, right? But how she, and we were speaking about this earlier, how she is able to, even in the working relationship, put aside her personal feelings around around Mbali and still work well with Zola, right? So she doesn't manufacture a thing where she fires Zola or she denies Zola a particular opportunity. There's a redeeming feature in that, right? Like that even in the vindictiveness and the scheming, you're still able to recognize that this person is extremely talented, but also that they deserve a foot in the door in a way that their lack of privilege and maybe just even class positioning would not allow them to. And so, there are some redeeming features, and I think Leroux comes along and just like makes her a better person. So, not boo all the way, some boo, not like boo, 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 boo all the way. There's some redeeming features about her, and I guess, maybe Black women can work together without necessarily having to be BFFs, right? And there's a thing about us being able to be in each other's circles and in each other's orbits without necessarily liking each other or loving each other, and still just treating each other respectfully, but also opening doors in ways that only we can, maybe.
Oh, Okuhle, I agree with you. She did intentionally be a professional mentor for Uzola, despite being a romantic rival, which is important because Zola really isn't the enemy for Okuhle. Zola did not do Okuhle wrong. That was all Mbali. Zola was not even a factor when all of that happened. And it is nice for the women not to be scratching at each other over a man. And even though you are rivaling and you both want the same thing, it doesn't need to be a mud-slinging wrestling match with a cat fight. There we go. It doesn't need to be a cat fight. It can be a little bit elevated.
A little bit. I wanted to know if you have a thing for names, right?
It is beautiful. It sounds calm, doesn't it? Leroux, there we go.
And I wanted to speak about kind of, it feels the entrance of him in Okuhle's life is a calmness, right? A stop chasing and let's be present together, because you are all the woman that you can be, right? All the things that you've worked hard for are yours. You don't need to show or do, just be still. And I wanted to talk about that kind of relationship, right? Because in truth, this isn't Okuhle's ideal man, in a sense that it's not Mbali and it's not la-di-da, da-da-da, but it is her ideal man in a sense that this is a man who will introduce Okuhle to herself, because we know Okuhle for a long time has been a product of Priscilla and the society in which she grew up and wanted to kind of belong to. But it's a moment in which we meet Okuhle as she meets herself, basically, as a result of this love interest.
I love that you put it that way. And I love that you got the whole calming effect of the name, Leroux. I love it. That is why I chose it. It just made me feel zen. And he is Okuhle's zen. That is what he's there for. He is her zen. He is not the man she wants, but he is the man she needs, because he is so far removed from the glitter and the sparkle and the fancy and the king mabai that she wants and she's used to and she's been looking for. And she has missed exactly what she needed. Yes, she was chasing this nonsense that made her mentally sick. She was sick. She was on the verge of some sort of meltdown. And in chasing all of that, she missed exactly what she needed, because like Mbali, Leroux has been around all along. He's been there all along. They went to the same school and she never even noticed him, because Zola and Okuhle are the same person. If you look at it closely, the hyper-focused. While Zola was hyper-focused on her career, Okuhle was hyper-focused on Mbali. And they both missed.
I mean,
they both missed them.
Even her decision.
Sorry, what?
Even her decision to begin to do internet dating and all of that, right, took a little bit of a while, because she's just been like, oh my gosh, am I letting go of Mbali? The dream.
Is it me? Am I the drama?
Yeah, am I the drama?
Is it me?
And for me, I love that, right? I felt that in many ways for both Zola and Okuhle and for Mbali, these were all kind of happier beginnings, right? The thing about, for me, honestly, and for Alma and I, like, as you can see, we really love this book. And I know, like, often people talk about books like this to be like, oh, guys, it's a nice holiday read. It's a nice beach read. Like, you'll enjoy it. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that, right? Because I think, like, as you've been saying, like, Black people's interior lives are deserving of examination, but also deserving of love, romance, and like just amazingness, right? And I feel like the thing with Zola really does that. It is not a beach read. It is actually a reflection of the ways in which we can show up. It's a reflection of the fact that, like, we are imperfect people who also are deserving of love, you know? I think about Bell Hooks, for instance, who says, for Black people, love is a crucial path to healing. And I think the thing about Zola is that for many of these people, like, the first thing that is healing them is the love that they've been seeking and finally find. We see that Zola actually realizes that Gunta is not love. Mbali realizes that actually love is important. Okuhle actually realizes the Delulu I was chasing was not love, but love can be like calmness.
So, you know, from us, this has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Zibu. You know, we are really looking forward to just what the future holds. I can see this on Netflix. I can see this on a TV screen somewhere.
I was already picturing Mbali. I'm like, oh, ibile nna. So
my husband will be listening to this. I cannot comment on that. But I definitely can see it, and I'm so excited to see what the future holds. But this has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for writing that thing with Zola. I think that, you know, I first read it, and I, you know, I'd seen your Instagram, and I was like, okay, I'm really excited to get this book. But as soon as I finished it, I was like, honey, what you need to do to get yourself.
He said, you better start reading that book. You better start reading that book because.
And I'm glad that, like, you know, the book didn't disappoint and the Tlokonolo hasn't decided to kick me off the cheekinators. But this is really just to congratulate you. This is such a beautiful book. It's so beautifully written. And I think the fact that we were able to just feel so deeply about so many of the characters is just a testament to how well you've weaved in some really important themes, but also just the ways in which you got us thinking, right? And I guess that is the role of fiction, and people don't recognize it, is that it gets you to think and to think deeply and outside of yourself, but also reflects on why you feel so strongly about certain things, right? And there's an act of like reflection here. So thank you so much. We are excited to see what the future holds, and we can't wait to see more from Mbali and Zola. So maybe like what happens in Rwanda.
Or after Rwanda, after the 6 months.
Yeah, I'm ready. See. I'm ready to catch in Kigali.
We will see.
We will see next year around April.
Yes. I'm excited. I'm already booking it in next year around April. I'm going to call you up and be like, you said April. One kind of final question that we have.
I'll be ready.
As we have as the Cheekinators is this, right? What do you hope the thing with Zola does? You know, as a writer, you've now spent that alone time with the characters, but now it's out in the world, right? And you don't know what you want it, what it can do. But what do you hope it does? As people who read it and pick it up, what is the hope you have for the readers of the thing with Zola?
Okay, I have many hopes, but we'll start with the first one, right? The thing with Zola is intentionally written the way I speak, because many important messages and themes are missed in literature because we tend to overspeak and we overcomplicate things. So I'm hoping that everyone can read this book and find something that is for them in this book, something that speaks to them and feels like they can relate to the book, like we're having a conversation, not that the book is above them, that literature is above them. It's a book written in the township by somebody who is from the township about people who are from and around the township, people we interact with every day. And aside from that, strangely sort of political and social commentary. I do hope that Black people read the book and see themselves in romantic situations and recognize that we are deserving of the kind of movie love, that soft, fuzzy, not that he beat me and I forgave him kind of love, you know, that we tend to see when it comes to Black people. When we read romance about Black women, Black men, it's always the forgiving, the begezelling, the making do. I want us to see that we are deserving of an aspirational romance, you know, the type of thing that only happens in fairy tales. We deserve that as much as every other blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman does. And we can have it, we can give it to each other. And that is why it is important for Zola to end up with Mbali and not Gunta, and find help in someone who looks like her, that she didn't expect. He looks like her. He kind of grew up facing similar trials as her. He is a different side of the same coin. And they heal each other and find happiness kind of together in the end. And I hope people who read this realize that we are the ones we are looking for type of, you know, message. We are the fairy tale. Yes. And we can give it to each other.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. As you can tell, we obviously loved The Thing with Zola. And we hope that our listeners also love The Thing with Zola. Listeners, again, you know what you got to do. No PDF, don't DM the author. Like, let's support Black writers. So you go out and you buy the book. You can also buy it from us. Just say, hey, Cheeky Natives, I'm looking for The Thing with Zola, and we'll hook you up. And you know what? Because we know authors, we'll even say, you know what? When you buy from us, we can ensure that it's just signed just a little bit.
Exactly.
There. Thank you, enjoy. Love. Black love is for you too. So again, Zibu, thank you so much for being in conversation with us, but more importantly, for introducing us to the characters in The Thing with Zola.
Thank you so much for having me and for getting it. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, Cheeky Natives. Bye.
Bye.